Hello and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, its history, and its flavor profile. I'm Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. All right, so joining me today is the man, the minister of keeping it real, and the Internet's favorite dad, Brittlestar. So, how you doing, Brittlestar?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. So if you could, for people who might not be familiar with you, and I don't know how that's possible.
I don't know how
could you tell us? Right. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Stewart Reynolds, but I'm better known online as Brittlestar. And for the past 8 years or so, I've been making social media videos. So started on Vine and do stuff on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and Clash and all that stuff. So it's a weird job to have as a middle-aged, fully grown man, but at the same time, it's not a bad gig. You know what I mean? It's all right. It keeps me in beer, which is good.
Right. I mean, so tell me a little bit. How did you get interested in craft beer?
I got interested in craft beer. To be honest, I mean, I've always liked, like ages ago, trying to get a better grasp of the start of this story. Back in 92, I spent about a month in Austria. And I'm not Austrian. I have no Austrian background whatsoever, no German background or anything. And one of the things that fascinated me is that we were staying in this tiny village. And then you go to these other villages and they'd all have the Gasthaus, right? That's like roadside little taverns type of thing. And you'd go to these little pubs and you'd say, I'll have a such and such beer. And they'll be like, yeah, we don't serve that beer here. We only serve this beer here. And it'd be like a regional craft beer. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And it kind of opened my eyes to the idea that, you can have, as opposed to just having a big brewery beer, which, I mean, some of them are fine. You could have this sort of very localized, interesting, unique sort of artisanal approach to beer, which is really exciting to me and kind of fun. And that kind of got me interested into it. And then I think maybe about 15 years ago or so, Stratford, Ontario, where I live, there was about 3 breweries that opened up. And suddenly craft beer was just like everywhere in town. So everywhere you'd go somewhere, you'd be amazing craft beer. And now I'm just kind of into it. So I like the idea of I'm a fan of beer in general. And there's certainly like those days where it doesn't matter what kind of beer it is. If you just if it's hot enough or if you're tired enough and you've worked hard enough, you just put it in your hands and it evaporates and it doesn't really matter what it is. And there's other days where it's like, it's nice to kind of say, well, I like beer, but what kind of interesting things can you do with it? What's the cool stuff you can do with it? And I've always been a fan of Guinness and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it doesn't matter. Porters, ales, bitters, stouts, whatever. I don't care. I'll drink it.
Beer's beer. I've said it several times, and a couple times during my little interview sessions here. I'm continually amazed that you can take 4 basic ingredients and make so many different flavors out of it.
I don't get it.
It's just it's barley, basically, water, yeast, and hops. You would think there'd be a lot less combinations available out there, but there just seem to be so many different flavors, and it's absolutely fantastic.
It's a real skill. I mean, to be a brewmaster is a real skill for sure. And I can't. I'm like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Ratatouille, the kids movie Ratatouille at all.
Yes.
But okay, so the scene where the main rat Remy is explaining to his brother about how flavors happen in his head, and there's like fireworks over his head and stuff. He's like, imagine this flavor and this flavor and this flavor, and he asks his brother to do the same thing, and his brother's this sort of like dopey looking chubby rat, and he tries to imagine, but they keep fizzling out over his head. He can't quite grasp them. I feel like an affinity to that rat. I mean, like, for a number of reasons, but one of them in this particular case is the fact that I have a hard time imagining how to combine taste and stuff. So when stuff happens and tastes good, it's like, oh man, I would have never thought of this. So it's always exciting. It's exciting to be me, is what I'm saying.
All right. Well, today we are going to be talking about porters. I will be enjoying Osthaus Pitchfork Porter. And Stewart, you're going to be having Mill Street Vanilla Porter?
Mill Street Draft Style Vanilla Porter. And beer with natural vanilla extract from the great people at Mill Street. And what's interesting about this beer is that I bought 2 cans of it, and one had a gold top and the other had a silver top. I don't know what the secret meaning is between, behind that, but I'll find out. We'll see.
Maybe you want a trip to Willy Wonka's secret brewery. Who knows?
Millie Wonka's Mill Street Brewery.
There you go. All right. So, for people who might not be aware, porter is a style of beer that originated in London in the early 18th century. It's a well-hopped and dark beer. Owing its appearance to the type of malt that was used, which was typically brown malt. The name originated from its popularity with the people who consumed it. So it was most popular with river and street porters because it was a cheap beer. Its popularity actually is a significant part of its history because it's one of the first beers to be recognized to be being brewed globally as opposed to being just a regional beer. Like a lot of beers are regional and you could only find them in certain areas. By the end of the 1800s, it was being brewed in the UK, it was being brewed in North America, Sweden, and Russia. So, and the cool thing is, I just did a show a couple days ago about stouts, and stouts and porters are so intertwined in their history that a lot of people don't know that they're basically the same beer if you go back to their history. So, stouts came about because they used to have different strength levels for porters. So there was extra porter and double porter, and then there was stout porter, and then it got to a point to where the stout porters were being varied so much that they broke it off into its own thing, and now they shortened the name just down to stout. And like for example, Guinness Extra Stout actually used to be called Extra Superior Porter, but they changed the name in the 1800s.
Huh.
So
very cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, and contrary to popular belief, modern porters are actually a lot less potent in terms of alcohol content than their predecessors. So early versions of the porters, came in around 6 or 7% on average. But due to taxation during the Napoleonic War, they actually lowered the ABV because they were using more water and less and less grain. So it became a weaker beer. And it just until craft brewing came back into fashion and started its rise, it stayed that way. So like now craft beers, you'll find porters that go anywhere from 4 to if you go up into the imperial porters and stuff, which start becoming more like stouts, you get up to like 7, 8, 9%. So it's kind of cool. Fun fact, I learned this while doing a little bit of research on porters. Temperature control and the hydrometer, which is the device used to determine how much alcohol is in a beer, were actually pioneered by the stout breweries in London.
Wow. You really have done your research.
It's kind of cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I try to do a bit of research, just to have some facts for people because I want the show to be both fun and
educational.
Educational.
Yeah. Give something back to the people for once.
Yeah, well, I mean, I take enough. I mean, all right. So I am going to pop open my beer.
Okay. Oh, fantastic! I'm going to try mine here.
Oh, yeah.
That's the sound it made. Well, it's like a milkshake coming out.
All right, so mine is a nice, dark, caramely brown. It's got a decent head on it. It's got a nice malty aroma. So typical, mine is a typical English style porter. So it should have little notes of coffee in there, some dark chocolate, have kind of an earthy and roasted nut flavor to it. The aroma should be malt forward. You shouldn't smell a lot of the hoppiness. The hoppiness is really well balanced in a typical porter. And I can say that having had Osthouse several times, that it is truly a traditional English style porter. How about yours?
Well, I have to be honest with you, Rob. About 7 years ago, I discovered I can't smell things very well. So it smells like the rest of the room.
Beer.
It just smells like nothing. I literally can't smell anything at all. Luckily, I can still taste some stuff. Let's just. I mean, it looks great. It looks like a pint of Guinness, right? It's got that sort of feel to it.
It's got that nice dark, with the creamy head on top.
Yeah, let's just like myself. Here we go. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's dangerous. Especially, I can taste the vanilla in that, which is great.
Have you never had this one before?
No, I've never had the Mill Street Vanilla Porter before, and it's quite good. That's a bit dangerous because it is milkshakey. It's super milkshakey. You'd be like, I can have like 8 of these, can I? Can I? Well, maybe.
I mean, who's gonna, who's there to stop you?
Pandemic rules. That's really tasty. That's very tasty. I like it a lot. It's funny though. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you.
Well, I was just gonna say.
Go ahead, man.
It's funny. What I was thinking about is that, people kind of shy away from dark beers, right? Like sort of like the casual beer drinker kind of goes, "Oh, dark beers." But they've never been. When I was 17, I was in Scotland, and went to a pub that used to belong to my great grandfather, and it was after hours, and I was taken there by a cousin's husband, and we were picking up another bottle of whatever, something, and yes, I was underage at the time, but hey, it was the 80s, man, it was crazy. And
who am I to judge?
Exactly. 18 was the drinking age, so it was only a couple months off, so it wasn't too bad. But the bartender said to me, he goes, "You ever had a pint of Guinness before?" And I said, "No, I've never. It seems too thick for me." And he said, No, try it. And he poured me a half pint, and he said, "After that first half pint, you'll love it. It'll be just like milk." And I was like, and you take the first sip, and you're like, it's dark, and it feels weird compared to regular beer. But sure enough, as soon as I was done, I was like, yeah, I will have another pint of that now, please. I'll take another one of those.
Right.
But it serves you well. Like that kind of darkness serves you well. I can think of another Scottish story where there's a pub called the Saracen's Head in Glasgow. And it's right across from the Barrowlands, which is like a big open-air market and a concert venue as well. And it's like a really notoriously tough pub. Who has, maybe not anymore, but did in 1999, or maybe even after that, actually, sometime in the 2000s when I was there last, has like a severed head in it. The pub's been around since 1710, and the Saracen's Head is what's in it. And anyway, I remember going there with a friend because it features in this book in a movie called Trainspotting. And we're like, we got to go.
Great movie.
Great movie. Terrifying, but a great movie. And walked into the pub with my friend who was coming over from Canada. I'd been living there for the year. And I was like, let's go in. He's like, what should we get? And I was like, we're both ordering pints of heavy. If we cannot go in there and ask for a lager, like we just can't do that because we will be stabbed immediately. So, I mean, if once you have your first couple of drinks of a dark beer, it's like instant manhood. You can impress anybody. You know what I mean?
You can take on the world.
Exactly. Stop yourself from being stabbed. Yeah. It's amazing.
Well, it's no secret to anyone who knows me that porters and stouts are my favorite beers. I just love the heavy maltiness of them, and in my opinion, if you can see through a beer, it's not really a beer.
So, like,
I like to be able to hold.
Yeah, like stand. Maybe even if you had to, you could stand on it. You know what I mean? That's what it looks like.
Right. Yeah.
So, and you're a fan of them. Like, do you just have when you go to get beer? Like, do you just have stouts and porters and stuff like that? That's it.
No, we've got all sorts. I drink all sorts of other beers, but
Right.
If I'm given a lineup of beers and there's a stout or a porter in that lineup,
that's
those
what
will be the
for.
ones I go to first. Yep.
Right.
I mean, if you look behind me, you can see I've got a kegerator off behind my left shoulder.
Yeah.
With three taps on it, two of which are stouts.
The same stout, just in case, like a reserve, or
No, so I do a lot of brewing myself.
Right.
One of them is an imperial stout, and one of them is just as I call it, a summer stout.
amazing. I like the idea of a summer stout because it's sort of like, this feels like a stout and a porter to me are like amazing winter beers. Like you sort of, even like fall, you get into like November and you're like, oh yeah, I could take one of these. I could stand my big wool knit sweater and I could just stand there and look like I've just come in from the lighthouse, and it's fantastic. But then you might want to enjoy it in the summertime, but you're then standing outside in some sort of, fluffy, bright colored short sleeve shirt. You're like, I think I'd like a summer stout. Is there same color, exactly the same color, or a different color?
The imperial stout's a little bit darker, but yeah,
Right.
they're both basically black beers. The
Right.
difference is the standard one comes in at just about 5%, whereas my
Yeah.
imperial comes in at 9%. So
Wow, nice. You need less
Yeah.
of those. Yeah, that's good.
wow,
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you need less of them unless you really want to get yourself wasted. Yeah, so the Mill Street one, the Mill Street Vanilla is a great one. I've had that one many times. What's another one? Beyond the Pale. They're up near Ottawa area.
Okay.
They have one called Gravity of Winter, which is really good.
Amazing.
And then one of my favorites that we tend to have in the house at all times is from Collective Arts. It's called Stranger Than Fiction.
Right. Yeah, I saw that one
and
today.
that one's a great porter as well. So, and they do variations on that. Like they had one, I don't know if it's still around or not, but they had one that was a coconut version of it, and it was absolutely fantastic.
I don't know. Do you think, like, maybe you'll know better than I will, but do you think that the appreciation for craft beer has, like, exponentially grown in the past 10 years? Compared to, I think back to like initially when craft beers came out, and people were like, it's not going to be great, or this isn't going to be a good experience afterwards. Whereas now it's kind of like, well, no, I'd rather have a craft beer if I have a choice.
Yeah, well, there's two camps for that. You've got your people that they are macro beer people. They want their Coors Light, they want their Molson, they want their Budweiser, and that's all they want.
Yeah,
and that's fine if that's all you want. And then you've got the people like me who's like, okay, yeah, this beer's okay, but there's got to be something else out there.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And that's how I got into it. I was like, okay, I was drinking. I'm originally from Illinois, so I was drinking things like the Miller products, so Miller Lite, Miller Genuine Draft, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, there's got to be better beers out there than this.
Yeah.
And
there are.
And I just started, and I started out by trying all sorts of stuff, and it got to a point to where I absolutely hated IPAs when there was that phase for IPAs where everybody was trying to out bitter and out hop each other.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It drove me away from them. I mean, if I'm going to have an IPA, my favorite is still a traditional English IPA, which got that strong malt backbone and a well balanced bitter with it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm trying to accomplish with this series that I'm doing is to maybe to maybe reach those people that wouldn't normally go for craft beer. The people that are like, I'm fine with my Bud Light, or I'm fine with my Coors or what have you. Trying to get them to realize that there are other things out there, and not all craft beer is going to be super heavy or super hoppy or anything like that. And so, it's fun.
It's totally true. I mean, it's interesting because you're right. I think that there's like almost like a perfunctory role that beer has taken on for some people, where it's like, I'm going to have a beer and it's going to be like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to have anything special about it. I just want to have that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. One of the greatest shames of my life is that my mother and father are from Scotland and emigrated to Canada just before I was born. And so there's like a reputation of like, good beer drinking culture in Scotland. And now all they drink is Molson Canadian. And it's like, okay, it makes them happy. But it's to the point now where I go in, if I go to pick up beer for my folks, because they're getting up there, and I go in to pick up beer for my folks at the beer store, and the woman behind the counter goes, "It's not for you, is it?" And I'm like, "No, it's not for me. I'm not buying 24 tall cans of Molson Canadian." But I think there's that idea of that perfunctory role of beer, as opposed to like when I will sort of force my parents to come out, and sometimes like prior, pre-pandemic, and hopefully again post-pandemic, we'll go somewhere, and I'll be like, I took them when I was filming in Vancouver. I brought them out for the trip, and they stayed in this apartment thing with me, and we drove up to Whistler, and I was like, "You're not going to have a Molson Canadian sitting at the bottom of Blackcomb Mountain. You're going to have Whistler whatever. You're going to have one of these local beers." And of course they enjoy them. I mean, they totally enjoy them, but they sort of feel like, I don't know if I want to roll the dice. And it's like, if you don't like it, that's the great thing about most craft beers is when you go somewhere, you're like, if you buy a can of beer, it's $3 and you're like, whatever, I'll survive. If I hate it, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you go to a pub, it's like, I'm going to try a taster of it. That's one of the secrets that people need to know. They need to know this, Rob. They need to know that they can go into a craft beer purveyor, like a pub there's a great pub here called Mercer Hall that just only sells craft beers. And no big macro breweries on tap. And you can try anything. You can Baskin Robbins the hell out of that place and get yourself a good couple of pints for nothing. I'll try the porter. No. Let me try and you just keep doing that. That's the exciting part about it, I think.
Right. And a lot of people, I think you're right. I don't think a lot of people understand that you can go into a place like that serves nothing but craft beer, or you can go directly to a tasting room that's attached to a brewery, and you can say, "Hey, can I have a taste of this? I'm not sure if that's something I'm going to like." And they will gladly give you, most breweries will give you 2 to 3 ounces. Here, try this and see if you like it. Or if you're not sure, you can do a flight. So they've got the little 4-ounce glasses.
Yeah.
And you can do like three or four glasses on a flight, and then you're like, I don't like that. And you're not out a lot. You're out, the cost of a flight's like $5 or $6, and you get to try like 4 beers. So.
Yeah, exactly. Plus then you have that experience, right? You have that, I always think of anything I'm doing in life as like a chance to tell a better story about it later. Like I can trump up this story. I won't use the word trump as a terrible word to use. I will boost up the story later. But that idea of like it's fun to have a flight of beers and go and try something and go, I don't like that. I mean, knowing that is amazing. Knowing that, as opposed to being like, it's like I've never had this beer before, and then stopping there and going, well, wait a minute, I could try it. And then you try it and you go, I like it. Or you try it and you go, I don't like it. And now I know that. And now I can move on. And now I'm a little bit richer for doing that experience. I think that's super important.
Right.
And why wouldn't
it
you
is.
do that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, life's too short to not be a little bit adventurous, and if the limit of your adventure is trying a different beer, hey, great, you've stepped outside your comfort zone.
That's right. It's a gateway adventure, though. That's what it is. It gets you into the mood of like, okay, what else should I try to sort of check out that I've been too scared to try out before? Don't do anything stupid, obviously, but it reminds me of a good example of trying a beer that was terrible, and that was a craft beer. We were doing a thing for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which involved a family road trip. And I mean a family road trip, meaning myself, my wife, my 2 sons, and my mom and my dad, all in one car, and driving to Cleveland, Ohio, and then driving back from Cleveland after we did the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was amazing. And Cleveland's one of my favorite spots. And we were driving back, and we're like, let's stop for lunch. So we stopped in Sandusky, Ohio. I don't know if you've ever been to Sandusky, Ohio, but
I have.
You don't need to. Yeah. You know what I mean? The people, we stopped at this bar, which is essentially downtown, and Sandusky's been obviously beaten up in the economy and whatever. Like, it's part of the Rust Belt, and it's definitely rusting. But the people were lovely. They were so nice, and it was really, really nice. And we went into this bar. And there was these 3 guys at the bar, and they're being incredibly loud, like just super loud. They're maybe like, I'm going to say like mid-30s roughly, but really, really loud. And we're just kind of like, we're a family eating our lunch, right? And we're ready to order. and we're all kind of cheery, chipper faced because we're on holiday essentially. And these guys look really rough. And one of them's mentioning about how he missed his parole officer yesterday. And it's like there's obviously these are like dangerous dudes. So they hear us talking and they realize that they've got, first of all, my parents talking, so they've got this Scottish accent happening. Then they've got this Canadian family. And so they turn around and go, "Where are you guys from?" So we start chatting, and that's fine. And they're like, "You're trying to decide what kind of beer you want? You should get this kind of beer. It's a jalapeno pepper beer." And I was like, "Oh." I'm thinking this guy's going to shoot me if I say no. He's obviously going to kill us all if I say no. I'm not drinking your stupid jalapeno beer. But then I was like, yeah, absolutely, sir. Whatever you say, that sounds great. And I tried it, and I choked that thing down. But it was possibly the worst beer I've ever had in my life, and it was really, really terrible. And for that reason, and now the fact that I've told that story in public, that guy's obviously going to kill me if I go back to Sandusky. So I can't go back to Sandusky ever again.
Well, I guess you're lucky that the border's still closed right now, because you can't go to Sandusky and he can't come here.
Exactly.
All right, so back to our beers at hand. All right, so when I taste this one, I get it's obviously it's going to be heavy in the malts because of the style of beer it is, but it's got a really nice toasty nut flavor to it, a little bit earthy, and then you get just a hint of the toasted and roasted malts in it. So just a little bit of that coffee flavor to it. Not a whole lot. It's just a tiny little hint on the back end of it. It's really nice. This is it's got a nice medium body to it. So it's not like drinking just a glass of water, but it's also not like drinking an imperial stout where it leaves a film in your mouth. It's I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe. It's a bit ephemeral, but not so ephemeral that you don't know that you had something to drink.
I like the description of beers. First of all, it could be interchanged with description of me. If you're describing me, you could say all those same things as well. Little toasted, nutty, that type of thing. Heavy on the malt. Bit earthy. Taste of coffee in the back. A little bit.
Hey, I don't want to know about what things taste like in the back, man.
So we're trying to give you the full experience here. It reminded me of a friend of mine who's went through chef school and went through a sommelier course, and the sommelier would and I won't say all the things they said, but they would ask them to describe different wines. And it's like describing taste is really hard because you default to like, oh, it's peppery. Oh, it's got a bit of apple, or it's got a bit of, like, you try to find those things that are kind of relatable. And this sommelier was like, no, don't use any of those. Don't use any other foods to describe this taste. Like, use other words. So he learned the best way to do is like, oh, it tastes, long legs. Yeah, and this is probably, deep brown eyes, and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds fantastic. So that's kind of how I feel about this. So.
Tastes like burning tires and rotten compost.
Exactly. When you pay your credit card bill late, that's what it tastes like. It tastes like that. Well, it's funny because
that's a terrible flavor.
Taste. Exactly. It's like, oh, it's bitter. Bitter. It's like it's quenching your thirst, but it's too late. Is what it's like.
So funny thing, I was talking, you and I have talked a few times on Twitter, and you know that I run with a bunch of guys who talk about beer, and you inevitably, I misclick and you get included in beer related tweets, and because for some reason it like sandwiches you right in between all my beer friends when I'm trying to select people.
I'll take the tags. I'll take all the attention I can get. It's all good.
But I was talking to a few of my friends on Twitter and a couple of the people I've had on the show, and I'm like, hey, I've actually got Brittlestar coming on the show, and they're like, he likes beer? I'm like,
really?
I'm like, what do you mean he likes beer?
What does that mean?
Like, apparently they think you're above beer. Maybe you're just a Scotch and cigar guy, kind of like one of the guys from Mad Men.
I didn't realize I projected this super classy above all men. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That's how I think of myself. Hey. But still, I didn't realize it was coming through so well. That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
yeah. So hey,
I sort of feel I feel like I feel like it's an easy match for you to look at my face and go, he obviously drinks beer. He
obviously. Well, my first reaction was like, well, he is Canadian.
Yeah, you have to. Canadian with Scottish background. I don't have a choice. I have to.
Right? I mean, if you don't have a Molson or a Wee Heavy hanging around your house, there's something wrong with you.
Exactly. Too right.
So, no. Feel free. Normally, I ask people who are on if they have any favorite breweries that produce this style of beer. I don't know if you do or not.
No, I do. I do actually. I had one recently, which was there's a brewery here in town called Black Swan Brewing, and they do a Russian stout. Stout? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Russian Imperial Stout.
Yeah, and it is kind of like being hit with a wet boxing glove, but in like the most sexy way possible. Is what it is. That's kind of it. That's how.
Yeah, Imperial Stouts. When people ask me how I like my beers, I say I like a beer that punches me in the mouth.
Yeah, well, that's what they do,
and that's why I tend to stick with like my wheelhouse normally for drinking beers is Imperial beer. So I like the stuff that's 9, 10, 11, 12% alcohol. So I want something that I can go to a party and I can show up with a bottle of beer and go, here's my beer for the night.
That's my beer.
As opposed to the guy who shows up. Yeah, as opposed to the guy who shows up with like a 30-pack of Corona.
Exactly. I got to get through 15 of these before I feel it.
Right. I'm like, yeah, I can get through half of this and I'm feeling great.
Exactly. And I'll be lucky if I have pants on.
Yeah. I tell you one to look for. There's a brewery out of the Toronto area called Man Antler. And
okay.
They make a porter that's a root beer porter. It's called the root of all evil. And
okay.
It's super interesting. It took me about 4 of them before I decided if I actually liked it or not. Because the flavor profile is just so different from a standard porter. It's got that kind of sarsaparilla and star anise thing going on in it, like root beer does. But it's also got that chocolate and that kind of earthy roastiness that you get from a porter. So it was kind of a weird amalgamation that took me a while to decide if I liked it. And then in the end, I decided, I really liked it. But another one that I used to love, and I don't think they make it anymore, is Nickelbrook used to make a maple porter. It was actually one of the first beers I had when I moved to Canada. I came up and discovered Nickelbrook, and they had it, and it was absolutely fantastic. But like I said, I don't think they make it anymore.
I think Canadians make anyone who just moves here try something with maple in it. I think you have to. I think just it's...
So here's the funny thing is... my wife and my sister-in-law and I were talking about this. I actually like maple more than either one of them.
Right. Are we sure they're Canadian?
Yeah, they were born here, so
the system fails sometimes.
Yeah, well, I am from Illinois, and as you know, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota are kind of like Canada light.
Yeah, exactly. I think especially as soon as you make the with Illinois, as soon as you do the like the Dan Aykroyd, and if you do the Second City people, and then you do like Wayne's World. I mean, Wayne's World with God, what's the character's last name? I can't remember his last name. It doesn't matter. But Wayne from Wayne's World, started as a Toronto character, and nothing changed, and he just seamlessly moved to Chicago or to Illinois.
Right.
And it's like
right to Aurora.
Yeah. What's interesting is I do voiceovers as well. And I've done like a huge run of Chicagoland voiceovers because I don't have to affect my pronunciation at all. I just sound like I fit in. I'm a well-spoken Chicagoan.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listening to you, normally like with my wife and my sister-in-law and a lot of my friends that I've met up here, I can hear a slight difference between the accent that they have and what my friends from Illinois have. Right. But you and a few other people I've met I can't pick it up.
Really?
What's funny is people often have trouble determining my accent because I lived all over the United States. I lived in the South, I lived in the West, I lived on the East Coast, I lived, so my accent's kind of muddled, but there are certain words, like I've got a friend who's a brewer over at Schooner Street Brewing in Waterloo, and he's from the Chicago area originally, and he's like he says every time you say my name I feel like I'm back in Chicago because of the way I say Scott. Scott. Yeah, Scott. It's got that in it. Yeah, Scott.
That's the when I started doing voiceovers in like I guess it's coming up in 10 years ago. The big things, of course, were like about, out, and house and roof, and it's like no, it's roof and house,
roof.
And sorry, of course. If sorry is the biggest, sorry, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. That my wife and I have had that discussion many times.
It's like, say you're sorry.
Because she says sorry.
Like, no, say sorry.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how the conversation goes. Yep.
Too funny. I love accents. So it's funny because my mother and father they moved here in 1968, and they now have, my mom and dad still have an accent, like definitely have the Scottish accent. They're both Glaswegian based essentially, and so they've got that real Scottish Glaswegian core to when they talk, and it's like if they have a couple beers in them, especially, it's kind of like, they're talking a lot, and they don't really move their lips or their teeth a lot. You just sort of talk, it's just the minimum amount of movement you can get away with your voice, and that's all. If you can convey your message without actually moving your face, then you've done it. And that's kind of their accent. Whereas my mom has this. My mom worked for us actually in our business prior to me doing the stuff I'm doing now, and she would answer the phones, and she has a phone voice, right? Like she's talking to us normally. She's like, oh well, I just went down to the grocery store and I did this and it was fine and it was great and blah, had a good day and blah blah blah. And the phone rings. She'd be like, oh, just 1 second. Hello, Echo Arts. How can I help you? And she's very like sort of properly pronounced, and she's like, she puts on this weird sort of transatlantic, accent. It's fascinating. I love it. So good.
That's hilarious.
I once got hired. Man. Sorry, I was just going to tell you one more story. You put me in front of a microphone, I can just tell stories about me over and over again.
Hey, that's fine because you have a lot more followers than I do, and it'll drive up my views.
Perfect. I remember I worked when I lived in Glasgow, or I lived in Helensburgh, but worked in Glasgow in Scotland. I was the only Canadian in the office. And I worked for Virgin Records in one of their mega stores, like a 4-story building right downtown Glasgow in the days, the burgeoning days of the music industry, and people were buying CDs still. And this store was massive and would sell like £1 million on a Saturday. Like, it was crazy amounts of trade they would do. But my job was a buyer, and so I had an office downstairs. And what happens is the phone would ring, and it would go from, like, if someone would call the office, it would go through all the offices, and no one picked up on the managers. It'd go to the assistant manager. No one picked up there. Go to the next person. Then it would wind its way down to me. So if no one had picked up the phone, my phone would ring. So I'd pick up the phone, and I would say, good afternoon, Virgin Megastore, Argyle Street, Glasgow. How can I help you? And I did this enough, because usually what happens is the guy on the other end of the phone is like, do you have FIFA 96, pal? Big man, you got FIFA 96? FIFA 96, the video game at the time. And
right.
And but I did it enough when the head office called from London. That head office then went to my manager and said, can you get Stewart to do a telephone answering seminar for the rest of the employees? And if you ever want to be hated fast by people in Glasgow, try to teach them how to answer the phone, So I'm standing here going, okay, well, this is the phone. So the phone rings. Is everyone watching? And when the phone rings, just pick it up. Say good morning or afternoon, depending on what it is. Good morning, Virgin Megastore, Argyle Street, Glasgow. How can I help you? How can I direct your call? And just like the daggers, people just like shooting daggers at me, just like, I want you dead. I'm going to stab you back. A lot of stabbing.
You son of a
bitch. Exactly. A lot of stabbing in Glasgow.
I've actually never been to Glasgow. I've been to Edinburgh. I was in Edinburgh 2 years ago for the half marathon out there.
Amazing.
Yeah, we made a vacation of it. So we went to Edinburgh for the half marathon. Then we did a jaunt over to Ireland for a few days, and then we went to London, England for a few days. Yeah,
fantastic. I mean, I love all those places. It's what's really interesting about Glasgow and Edinburgh is that Edinburgh and Glasgow are a 45-minute train ride away, but people don't cross. East Coast, West Coast. Nope. Why would I ever go to Edinburgh? Why would I ever go to Glasgow? It's just weird,
right? Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends who's from London, but he goes all over, and he's like, "Yeah, it's amazing." They're like, "Oh yeah, these friends of ours, they live 30 minutes away, but we don't ever drive there."
I know. It's like,
what do you mean you don't ever go?
Yeah, it's like a trip to the mall. It's nothing. It's crazy.
I was like, I once hopped in my truck at 2:00 in the morning and drove 16 hours to visit a friend in Denver, Colorado from Illinois.
Exactly. But it's such a different culture in Britain. I mean, they live on a tiny island, right? So I think that's probably a big part of it. But when we lived there, we went down to see my younger sister. She's younger by 8 years, and she was doing this like last year's school trip thing where school came over and played concerts in England. And so she was like in Harrogate. So she's like a 4-hour drive away. And I told the people I worked with, we were driving down for the weekend to Harrogate, and they thought I was insane. They were like, how far away is it? I was like, 4 hours. 4 hours? It's like, yeah, it's nothing. We'll stop to pee once, maybe. That's it. We'll be fine.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it always amazes me. I mean, we're so accustomed to driving because I'm from the United States, and Canada's not any smaller. So, and the things are so far apart. It's like, I've got friends that live on the West Coast, and I drove one time from Rockford, Illinois to San Francisco to visit a friend. It's
crazy.
Like it was a 4-day trip. Yeah, okay, yeah. I drove 4 days. Big
who
deal.
Cares? Yeah, exactly. I know.
I stayed for a week and I drove back.
Yeah, it's just a totally different mindset, I think, in travel that way. Which also interesting, though, of course, because my sister-in-law and her husband and their daughter, they will think nothing of going to Sweden, going to France, going to Denmark, going to Germany. For a weekend, which seems like ridiculously exotic to us. But then if you say, oh, we're going to drive up, like the thought of them driving from London, where they live, to Glasgow, which is like an 8-hour drive, they'd be like, oh God, no, we could never do that. We would never drive
right.
8 hours. Bizarre. I don't get it.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
Glasgow's great though. If you ever get a chance to go back to Glasgow, go to Glasgow. It's a very different city from Edinburgh. As much history, but very it is remarkable, the difference in culture between West Coast and East Coast Scottish. Very, very different. If you ever go to Glasgow, and this is a tip for anyone watching as well, if you ever go to Glasgow, know this, that en masse, Glaswegians will kill you. But as soon as you touch one of them and say, how are you? I'm so-and-so, they will be your best friend for life. That is like the guaranteed way to do it. Well, unless you get stabbed, but you probably won't get stabbed. But if you're, I learned that when my dad's friend came over, he's not sort of quasi-uncle, came over when I first moved there, took me out for lunch. We were walking across the pedestrian street in Glasgow, and it was like thousands of people, all pushing and shoving, and it was really horrible. And he would just touch every person on the shoulder and say, excuse me, hen. Excuse me, hen. Sorry, hen. How you doing? Good to see you. And everyone would be like, oh, absolutely. You're right. Here. And they would like make way and like sort of parting of the Red Sea for him. And I remember using that tactic in the Horseshoe Bar in Glasgow as well, on Drury Lane, literally. And there was these guys being really rough and bumping against us, beside us at the bar. And I said, hey, how you doing? I'm Stewart. I'm from Canada. Nice to meet you, man. And he's like, oh, sorry, man. We were bumping into you. Sorry about that. Sorry. And they were like the nicest guys after that. So that's my tip. En masse, Scottish Glaswegians will kill you individually. Break them down into individuals, and they're the nicest people ever.
That's a good travel tip. Yeah, we want to get back to Scotland. We really enjoyed our time when we were there. We were there for a week, so it wasn't a whole lot of time. But we want to get back there, and we'd like to go back to Ireland, because when we were in Ireland, we were only there for I think 3 days, and we didn't really get outside of Dublin. So we'd like to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I haven't been to Ireland apart from once at an airport at 7 a.m. and I had a pint of Guinness because I was in Ireland. I was like, I don't care. You serve me a Guinness? And he's like, sure, great. So it was 7 a.m. for like half an hour, and I was there. Awesome.
All right. So we're coming to the end of the show. This is the part where I like to give a shout out to a brewery that I think does this style really well. You're welcome to give a shout out to a brewery that you like, or a shout out to anything you really want, because I don't really care. I'm just that easygoing. So
Fantastic.
I'd like to give a shout out to Muddy York Brewing from Toronto, and that's how you can tell I'm not Canadian. I say Toronto.
Toronto, exactly. It's Toronto.
I don't say Toronto or Tirana.
Toronto.
Muddy York Brewing in Toronto does a fantastic job with all of their beers. But if you're looking for a porter, they make a great one that's literally just called Muddy York Porter.
Amazing. Fantastic. Yeah, no, I mean, props to Mill Street for making this. Again, it's fantastic. I've got another one in the fridge, so I'll be enjoying that one in a moment. That, and of course, I'm just so thankful that living in this tiny town of 32,000 people where we live in Stratford, there's like Black Swan Brewing, there's Mercer, there's Bray House, there's MVP, there's Stratford Brewing Company, there's Job Site. Like, there's a ton of breweries, and they're all churning out great stuff, which is, and with the pandemic, you get door delivery. I mean, how can you not like that?
Right. That of all the things that have happened because of the pandemic, the door service basically has been absolutely fantastic. Like, normally in non-pandemic times, my wife and I, we drive in the summertime. We drive all over hell and creation, going to different breweries.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to, but it's nice that, it's like, I was able to get stuff from Full Beard Brewing in Timmins,
amazing,
delivered to my house.
Amazing, phenomenal. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the idea that I can go online and go to a craft brewery's website and just order a beer, and it just shows up on my front porch. How cool is that? That's amazing.
Yeah. Now, I've said this before, and we've talked about this before. When this pandemic stuff's all over, I expect you and I to get together.
Obviously.
I mean, not just you and I, maybe just bring the wives along as well, and we can go to some place and drink some beers and have a good time.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, it's funny because there's like a growing list of people. I'm like, yeah, well, we'll definitely do a beer. Yeah, we'll do a beer. It'll be interesting to see what happens, after this pandemic we kind of come out of our shells and out of our cocoon and ease ourselves back into regular life. And it's like, I think people they'll be working hard to catch up for lost time,
Yeah, well, what's funny is we bought this house 2 years ago, and we did some renovation to it. And like, all right, in this spring we're going to have people over, we're going to have a big barbecue, we're going to have all sorts of fun, and then the pandemic hit, and we're on year 2 of not being able to have this big party to celebrate that we got this house.
It's going to be the party's just getting bigger and bigger, and the longer you wait.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I keep telling people, I'm just going to keep brewing beer, and when people show up, we're just going to drink.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Stewart for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I'd like to thank anybody who's watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. If you want to be notified when there's a new episode available, click the little bell. Please feel free to leave comments, questions, concerns, suggestions for a beer style that you'd like to have discussed on the show, or if you're interested in even being on the show and talking about craft beer, I'm open to that as well. So leave that stuff in the comments below. Other than that, until next time, cheers. I'm out.
I can wait. I don't know if I can pour. I don't know if you're on that side of the screen or not. I can maybe pour it.
Yeah. Oh, wait.
This show would get really good after 5 beers. I think it would get really, really good after 5 beers.
Yeah. Well, you're always welcome to come back for a 5 beer beerathon.
I should have pre-gamed. That's what I should have done.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot, Stewart.
Thank you very much for having me.